Hello everyone, I'm Viti and welcome to Bangkok and warm greetings to everyone from the university where I work. The issue decriminalization of consensual same-sex relations is a long-standing issue of great concern to all of us because even today about 65 countries criminalize love and friendship in the private sphere where people want to enjoy same-sex relations, very regrettably. So we have to tackle this very empathetically in terms of understanding the plight of our friends, our families globally who are affected by these criminal laws and the criminalization process. This is a great opportunity to come together to look at the state of the situation. And there are three angles to be addressed. One, the context. Two, the components. And three, what next? The coefficients for the future. As I've said, in terms of the context, there are about 65 countries that criminalize same-sex relations, unfortunately. And many or most of them are in Asia and Africa, especially West Asia, parts of Africa, and some parts of Southeast Asia. The laws used against these private matters cover very odd terms such as carnal intercourse against the course of nature, illicit acts, unnatural acts, etc., etc. And what is worrying is the trend now in one country not only to criminalize relationships, but to criminalize the fact that I or you or we are gay or lesbian or gender diverse. One country has now proposed a law to criminalize the fact of being LGBT. The law is not passed, and worse still, in terms of the draft law, is that it would impose mandatory reporting of whoever's gay or lesbian or whatever. So the family or third parties would be obliged to report. And this is a very, very cruel law in draft form, which should never be passed. And we must activate against that. And close by around here, of course, we have some new laws also, sadly, which now criminalize cohabitation, sex beyond marriage, affecting both hetero and homo relationships, as well as many others. But not everything is sad or traumatic, and let's be positive and constructive. We have some countries in Southeast Asia now, or South Asia, that have decriminalized same-sex relations happily. We have some very good court cases, such as in India, in Nepal, some other countries that open up to liberalization. One court case in India famously decided that an old colonial law, which had criminalized same-sex relations, was unconstitutional, and that has now been revoked. But we cannot be lethargic on this. We have to look at whatever remains in terms of the remnants of discrimination and abuse through the legal perspective. So let's have a look at the components of some of these objectionable laws that still exist. Law, sort of hard law, such as legislation, and soft law, such as various policies and practices. There are about 5 or 6 different types that have to be looked at in terms of components. Number one is the old colonial laws, usually Article 377, which pervaded many countries in the past. And while, of course, the country of origin, United Kingdom, has amended that a long time ago, various parts of the colonies still, or former colonies, still apply that law. 3, remain in Southeast Asia. Not necessarily implemented so much, but still on the books. And one country's gone very draconian in terms of linking that also with religious law to discriminate and abuse LGBTI people. So we have to try to suspend these laws as well as to revoke them, the old colonial laws. 3 remaining in Southeast Asia. 2, criminal laws, usually Penal Code or Sexual Offences Act, which incorporate elements such as prohibition of indecency, prohibition of sodomy, carnal intercourse against the course of nature, etc. And many countries still have these penal laws that have to be revoked or suspended or amended. And happily, some countries have done so in terms of revocation and abrogation. Thirdly, we have other laws, not necessarily your penal code, criminal law, but other laws which have criminal implications. For example, national security laws, which are used against advocacy by LGBTI people. Or you have in some countries laws against cross-dressing. Men are not allowed to dress as women, with severe implications, also linked with some religious laws. Thirdly, you might have laws that try to exclude participation, unfortunately, against, for example, advocacy by NGOs. So you have these foreign elements laws, the laws concerning operations of NGOs, which also limit the space for advocacy. And new words have come into play, like ideology, propaganda, extremism. All these are encapsulated by various laws which are increasingly used by some countries against LGBTI groups. Fourthly, you have the religious laws. And may I add that maybe it's not necessarily religious laws, but it's the interpretation of certain religions by some groups in a closed manner, non-empathetic manner, which then leads to discrimination and abuse. And sadly, we have rather draconian interpretation of various religious laws in Southeast Asia today and elsewhere, influenced also sometimes by outside influences. Fifth, various digital laws in this new vortex of digitalization, algorithms, etc., which are used against our advocacy and our sense of being. One country now is proposing a new law against apps which are used to connect between LGBTI groups. Already a sort of prohibition in practice, but they're proposing a new law, and we have to be very wary of this. And then finally, the new field of artificial intelligence. Some countries have no law or have very broad laws that enable, sadly, surveillance, social profiling, discrimination, all kinds of abuses coming through the new field of AI. And we have to be very careful about this because there are ethical issues concerned, there are human rights issues concerned in regard to the new vista of AI. Having said that, there are key international principles and good laws and good practices from also many countries which open up and respect non-discrimination, respect privacy, respect the whole gamut of human rights. The right to life, not to be abused, not to be tortured, not to be beaten. Famously, the old case of Toonan and Australia reminds us about these international principles. That was a case concerning Tasmania, which used to criminalize same-sex relations, now done away with because of the application of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, particularly the principle of non-discrimination and respect for privacy and family life. But we have a long way to go still, and we must not be daunted. So let's have a look finally at some of the coefficients to have a multiplier effect in terms of what we wish to advocate and disseminate and activate constructively, peacefully, and empathetically. Number one, laws. if we have bad laws, which we do in about 60 plus countries, they should not be implemented. I tend to advocate suspension first, don't apply them, and then work towards reform and revocation. Refrain, desist from applying bad laws. Having said that, we might need some new laws also, good new laws based on international standards. We might need a law on protection against discrimination, anti-discrimination law that covers sexual orientation, gender identity, etc. We might need a law against hate speech based on international standards, incitement to hatred, as well as softer rules such as self-regulation by various industries. We might need a law in terms of protection of privacy in this brave new world of digitalization. And we might need a law against conversion therapy, which is of concern because several countries oblige families to take their children, to take their husbands, usually also sometimes, to be converted gender-wise or sexually from being usually gay into non-gay. And that's against our very sense of being and self-determination and autonomy. So some new laws might be required. Secondly, some good policies or overcome bad policies. And we have the Sustainable Development Goals to guide us a bit. This can be explored for the future in terms of leaving no one behind against discrimination, against abuse, against violence. Thirdly, good programming. And this wonderful Pride Month in Thailand and beyond, and IDAHO, great programming that's emerging, has emerged and will emerge in terms of opening up the space for everyone without discrimination, without abuse. Fourthly, enforcement, good enforcement and implementation. We have good casework on many fronts. I'm proud to say that in China, a couple of courts activated against conversion therapy. Particularly a certain gentleman took the case to a certain court in a province, and it concerned his well-being because his family pushed him to a hospital to be so-called treated for being gay. And he had to take a lot of medicine, he was forced to, and ultimately he took the case to court and won and got compensation. So I welcome that very much in terms of activation through the courts. But we might need a law also against conversion therapy. Fourthly, good mechanisms and personnel. We have ombudspersons acting sometimes to help us, human rights commissions. One human rights commission in Southeast Asia where it is still criminal to have same-sex relations. One human rights commission in Southeast Asia where that is still the case, dared to put on its internet the advocacy of non-violence against LGBTI. So ingenuity, astute action is also required, particularly from these mechanisms. Fifth, the question of resources. NGOs, sadly, are now missing a lot of the resources because of this fragmented world. But I think to encourage particularly LGBTI NGOs to sort of self-finance a bit. I just went down to to see one NGO in a certain part of Thailand, and that NGO actually produces products to sell and then to help children in particular. And it may have a farm, but famously it's now producing chef's table where it can earn income to generate its well-being as well as its various activities without necessarily depending upon money from abroad. And resources also include goodwill, leadership, and very importantly, techno-resources. We need responsible technologies, particularly maybe some good laws, guardrails against abuses by AI, particularly social profiling, biometric abuses, which need to be overcome by laws also, as part of the resource in regard to responsive technologies. And then 3 or 4 others as entry points: good education and capacity building. The most recent report of the UN independent expert on sexual orientation and gender identity was very much to address education from the angle of the right to education, including literacy on sexuality. And unfortunately, this is being impeded on some fronts. But let's say that education, capacity building, very, very important in terms of empathy. And I remember visiting one country when I was the independent expert and talking with teachers. One teacher said, you know, Viti, it's not difficult to teach gender diversity at the primary level. Why don't you use a fairy tale? It's not just men and women who love, but maybe men and men, or women and women, or others. So 2 kings might love each other, or 2 queens might love each other. That does not have to be a gender-specific Cinderella at all, with or without glass slippers. And let's not be slippery there, but straightforward, perspicacious in terms of what we advocate. And then finally, some accountability remedies, very important. Also data and monitoring, with due respect to privacy, but to enable audit, assessment, and adjustment. And last but not least, the space to change. All this depends very much upon networking, rationalization through expression, assemblies, where the space is increasingly limited in some areas. Civil society space, in terms of democracy, limited in many areas of Asia today. One rapporteur, or one independent expert, said that the space, sadly, for civil society is shrinking, shrunken, shrunk. We are not here to yield to that at all, but we must project hope, be examples of the possibility of change, the hope that enables good laws, policies, and practices to be well nurtured and implemented with empathy, with consideration, with compassion, based upon our human rights. And to be wise about this, to be intersectional in terms of our understanding, different types of capacity, but also different types of measures that I've listed. In the context, ultimately, in the landscape of human rights, peace, sustainable development, democracy, environmental protection, and responsible technologies. I wish you a great time. I wish you happiness, progress. I wish you strength, heartwarming action based on the beauty of all the colors of the rainbow. Thank you.